All of this, as Canada has been demonstrating through this COP, must be done in full partnership with Indigenous peoples. Success relies on full engagement, and it demands that we act with the urgency that is required.
Canada's been touting its collaboration throughout the COP15 conference. But Thursday, First Nations in northern Alberta sounded the alarm about Canada potentially allowing oil companies to dump toxic waste in vital waterways without Indigenous consent.
How does this fit with Canada's messages these past few weeks? Their vision for nature-based solutions, their vision for Indigenous-led conservation and protected areas, especially within a fragile ecosystem such as the downstream Peace Athabasca Delta.
Tailings ponds sound almost innocuous, but they're actually lake-sized deposits of toxic waste.
This is over 300 square kilometres of boreal forest.
It's wastewater from extracting oil from the Alberta tar sands that oil companies have been storing for decades. Now they've reached a point where they can't store much more. Canada has been looking at modifying the Fisheries Act to allow an exemption for oil companies to dump their partially treated waste into the Athabasca River that feeds into the Mackenzie River system, dubbed the Arctic Amazon. According to Melody Lepin of the Misiku First Nation, tailings ponds have led to high rates of autoimmune disease and cancer in downstream communities. Lepin says allowing this waste, even if it's partially treated, to filter into waterways could worsen health impacts.
So never has there been a baseline health study to examine what is changing the health of my community.
Affected First Nations are being consulted, but Lepin says they're worried other options to clean up tailings ponds, like reusing the water in tar sands extraction or treating the water until it's drinkable, are not being explored.
We have intervened, voicing concerns about the growth and management of these tailings, and here we are somewhat 40-something years later with only one option forced upon us, and that is to now treat and release these massive tailings ponds.
It is possible to purify tailings ponds water to the point where it's drinkable, but it's expensive. However, since the top 7 oil and gas companies made over $170 billion in profits in the first 9 months of 2022, Campaign for Nature suggests they should be footing more of the bill when it comes to biodiversity loss.
If we want to find a source for increased finance for biodiversity, it's simple. Let's place a windfall tax on those companies that have driven biodiversity loss, primarily the oil and gas companies and the mining companies. They have made massive profits in the last year, while the rest of the global economy has suffered.
Lepin says Alberta has not allocated enough funding for tailings ponds cleanup and says the federal government could also source some revenue.
The commitments to Indigenous and protected and conserved areas and the financial commitments for that, I applaud the government there. We need to conserve more. We need to protect more of these pristine habitats. But at the same time, let's not forget about the disturbed, highly toxic places.
Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.